Part 2. The Lodge and the Revolution. 400 years after the Templar Order was outlawed by the papal authority, it was still alive in the form of numerous entities. Despite being fractured by the religious squabbles of Europe, the order still retained many of its goals, which included survival, resistance to the overbearing religious powers of the day, and a conspiratorial brotherhood of self-protection. By the early 18th century there were several institutions that could claim direct descent from the original Knights Templar. Among these groups were military orders that could exist in the open and secret societies that survived underground. The secret society of underground masonry in Scotland was the most authentic remnant Templar group, and it would later call itself the Ancient Lodge. 92. The Lodge in the Revolution. The underground lodge system had been the refuge of the ex-Templars. For decades it helped many survive and evade arrest. Through the centuries, however, the lodge system became more open, and it gave birth to the more public Freemasonry. The world and the Masonic lodges would then become divided as a result of religion, politics, and economics. No longer would every Mason be welcomed in every lodge. Europe and Masonry would be torn apart by the revolt against the papacy. The conflicts that had started in Europe found their way over the Atlantic, as did the solutions. The revolt against the church led to a revolt against the aristocratic system that kept the majority in a peasant caste. This economic revolt gave rise to a middle class in which anyone could participate provided he could find a means. Secret societies and law-breaking provided the fastest route to economic prosperity. Europe was rife with conspiracies great and small. Men conspired to protect themselves from the horrors of the constant wars over religion. They conspired to protect their own industry by keeping competition out. They conspired to break a multitude of trade laws that did little to foster trade, and much to enrich the kings. And everywhere there was conspiracy, there were places for conspirators to meet. The lodge system provided that refuge. Not all conspiracy could be considered bad. Joining a secret society in America provided the means to raise one's station in life, to find work, to belong to a community, and to transcend the religious squabbles of the Europeans. At the same time, it also provided avenues to wealth through breaking the law, and it bred dissent, and stirred the mobs against the weak government. Once the hostilities against the crown started, secret societies allowed the colonists to create a spy network, and to strike the enemy in the most unsuspecting way. The American Revolution began as a reaction to Britain cracking down on smuggling. Those whom the British declared smugglers were considered by the Americans simply to be merchants, although these merchants had something in common. Like pirates, the smugglers needed connections to survive. This meant belonging to the right lodges. While smuggling was done by individual merchants, it required the Lodge in the Revolution 93 a support system that was anything but small. Merchants buying even basic commodities from many of the numerous European possessions in the New World were almost always breaking the law. A system of trust evolved through a secret society. Masonry. The American Revolution was fought by a network of spies, diplomats, smugglers, Freemasons, and slave traders. Although they were rarely united politically, they did share an interest and the means to accomplish their interest. Masonic ties allowed conspirators from England, New York, and the Carolinas to find a common ground and make critical moves behind the scenes. One prominent example is Benjamin Franklin, who moved freely through Masonic circles that stretched from London to Paris and Nantes. Franklin was able to stir dissent among the British, bring in supplies from the Netherlands, and ultimately bring the French into the war. From Britain, Franklin enlisted members of a hedonistic entity known as the Hellfire Club, whose orgiastic activities would shock even modern Britain, to muster public support against the war, and for the Sons of Liberty. Through a smuggling network that operated in the Caribbean from Bermuda and from Europe, American sea captains supplied the revolutionaries with munitions. Franklin's Masonic connections in France were wealthy slave traders, often Huguenots, who operated through lodge systems that reached everywhere their ships sailed. Friends were also found among the aristocratic class in France, with Masonry again paving the way even as the royals were ardent Catholics. In a most audacious move, a wealthy French family bribed the British admiral heading the war effort to deny support to Cornwallis at Yorktown. At the same time, the French contingent led by the Knights of the Sovereign Order of Malta supplied the American side. The American Revolution was won, not on the battlefield as much as in the secret meetings of numerous conspirators like Benjamin Franklin and his lodge brothers. With the war won, the architects of the new republic gave birth to a government steeped in Masonic symbolism, while Washington founded an aristocratic society, where breeding and heredity were the 94th lodge, and the Revolution most important tickets for admission. Strange? Yes, but less so as one understands the maelstrom of the 18th century world, in which the old ways of religious and aristocratic authority were being challenged on a regular basis. The dramatic changes that affected everyone's daily life created a nation, while also fostering a new elite. The new elite, unfortunately, promoted an elitist attitude long after the independence, that allowed criminal activity, as long as they were the ultimate beneficiaries. John Hancock might serve as the best example of a well-connected Mason who became a great patriot, for the sake of his own fortune. With one foot in an elite lodge, and the other in a workingman's lodge, he somehow was able to present himself as a champion of liberty and a prince of industry. Hancock rode in a well-appointed carriage around Boston clad in the aristocratic purple that was his trademark, yet he would be a hero to the thousands of hard-working dockworkers who depended on him for employment. One could argue that the American Revolution started when a ship belonging to Hancock, the Liberty, was seized. The event and the actions that followed connected the wealthy Hancock and his lodge to the working class, who belonged to numerous other lodges, and to Sam Adams. John Hancock was born into a wealthy and connected mercantile family. He became one of the wealthiest merchants through inheritance from an uncle. He understood from early on that a merchant needed connections, and one very important way to develop those connections was through Masonry. Hancock's uncle became a Mason in an aristocratic lodge in Canada. By being admitted to a lodge in one city, he could then attend lodge gatherings in other cities. In Boston, Hancock would attend the meetings of a working-class lodge known as St. Andrews. Masonry was undergoing great change. The craft in America and England had seen a dilution of its original values, which had included liberty and equality. While liberty was prized by all, equality was not present in the new class system. What would be called modern Masonry shared much with the rising mercantile and professional classes, but the Lodge and the Revolution 95 formed the English Whig Party in the political arena, and a bourgeois class in the economy. With new Masons accepted by invitation and common agreement, individuals in the lower echelons of the changing society, a stonemason, for example, were not always welcome. This was a repudiation of the Masonic ideals, and the effect was that an elite class was allowed to develop and service the careers of its members. Politics and religion were still inseparable, and the modern Lodge Masons were pro-Parliament, and very much Protestant to time, when the world was still fighting a constant series of wars over the religious leanings and marriages of its kings and queens. On June the 24th, 1717, representatives from 4 English lodges met at the Goose and Gridiron Ale House in London, and created the Grand Lodge. By going public, the Grand Lodge, also known as the Mother Lodge, ended centuries of underground operations. Instead of being a craft guild, where members of the same trades could meet and act to serve one another's interests, no longer was a particular trade required for membership. Masonry in the Grand Lodge style became speculative Masonry. This modern interpretation eliminated the titles and tools of a working craft, and made them into mystical symbols. There were 4 major lodges in England that went public to create the Grand Lodge. They had been meeting for years, so it was not much of an event at the time. Within 2 years the number of lodges increased tenfold, but as many as 26 had been already in operation. 1 When these lodges met, they toasted the Hanoverian king, and sang patriotic songs. Because this was just a short time after the most recent Scottish rebellion, the modern Masons hoped that going public would distance them from the Scottish Masons, and help them avoid suspicion. The establishment of the English modern Grand Lodge as a public institution served more than one purpose. It allowed English Masons to publicly distance themselves from Jacobite Masons,